What's up, guys? Just stop that. How you guys doing?
Excellent.
Yo. Thanks for being here, gentlemen. So, boy, I've got so many notes, so many things, so many topics to cover. I've been reviewing this book. Yeah, what do you say today? Let's dive in, starting with the preface and maybe, first couple pages of the beginning chapter. But first off, before we do dive into the actual content of the book, let me just give a little frame for anybody who may tune into this later, okay? So I think, Rico and Eric, you guys each have your copy, right? Today we're diving into Joseph Campbell, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And first off, I just want to give a little context, I guess, to like who Joseph Campbell is and what this hero's journey, or the monomyth as he called it, what that means. So just real quick, I'll just like start by reading off the back of the book. Often cited as Joseph Campbell's best book, this classic study traces the story of the hero's journey and transformation through virtually all the mythologies of the world, revealing the one archetypal hero in them all. Originally published in 1949, it has inspired generations of students and sold nearly 1 million copies in various editions. This was probably, this book I have is at least 15 years old. So I first read this, like in 2003, 2003 or 2004 probably, 15 plus years ago when I actually got my degree in humanities and religious studies. So that was my first introduction to Campbell. And, I found it very fascinating back then because as they say, Campbell was largely, I think, looked at, even maybe still, but especially in his heyday, as kind of the granddaddy of mythological studies and comparative religions as well. Let me see if, real quick, let's switch on. Okay, so this is the man, the myth, and the legend, Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was an American professor of literature at Sarah Lawrence College who worked in comparative mythology and comparative religion. His work covers many aspects of the human experience. Campbell's best-known work is his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, from 1949, in which he discusses his theory of the journey of the archetypal hero shared by world mythologies. He also termed it the monomyth. So hero's journey and the monomyth in Campbell speak is kind of interchangeable. Since the publication of The Hero with a Thousand Faces, Campbell's theories have been applied by a wide variety of modern writers and artists. His philosophy has been summarized by his own often repeated phrase, "Follow your bliss." He gained recognition in Hollywood when George Lucas, the guy behind Star Wars, credited his work as influencing the Star Wars saga. So that's Joseph Campbell. And the monomyth, or the hero's journey, is in my belief. I mean, you will learn it if you study world mythology, comparative religions. That's the context I first encountered this material in. As I said, 15 plus years ago. Much later in my career, one of my mentors had actually been a Hollywood scriptwriter. And he brought up Joseph Campbell to me again, and I just learned the depth to which his framework, kind of more as a literary framework, was, at least it used to be, pretty well known and commonly used in script writing. So a lot of the superhero movies we've been talking about on some of our calls, they follow this pattern as well. Campbell identified it, in religious traditions and in all the ancient writings from from the earliest civilizations, from the Greeks, of course, the Roman mythology, in the Bible stories, in the story of the Buddha. So yeah, East and West, and all throughout time, and so it's very commonly used tool in when you're looking at literature. It's commonly used for writers who are writing their novels and script writers who are writing movie scripts. But I think, in the last 100 years or so, there's also a lot of overlap with, I would say, particularly Jungian psychology, and it is a tool that maps pretty nicely onto psychology and psychiatry as well, which we'll actually, we'll see a brief reference to that actually in the preface. But so what is the hero's journey? I'll give you a real quick rundown here, a high level framework, I guess. It's basically a cycle. So it's often, again, let me see if I can show you guys. Hang on one second, and I'll try to give you a visual here. Here we go. Does that show up? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's often visualized, with a circle. Here, I believe in this case, it's going clockwise. See the little arrow. Kind of start at the top, which is our normal everyday world, and the hero goes around this loop, this adventure, this journey, that takes him away from his normal everyday surroundings and crosses a threshold into the unknown, some foreign land, or sometimes it's the unconscious. He reaches his lowest point, which is often where there's no telling whether he'll survive. Sometimes there is a death and rebirth, but eventually kind of comes out of that, a stronger, more whole person, and returns to his community or her community, and brings back some kind of a reward or a boon, as they call it. But generally speaking, it's kind of broken down into three larger, this diagram in particular is quite complex, listing a lot of the different elements. And not every story has every single one of the elements, but Campbell really broke it down into 17 stages in his format. But there's kind of three overarching bigger segments. So it's separation is the first, or departure, where the hero is called away and leaves his people, his home, his comfort zone. And the second stage, typically they would call initiation. So sometimes that includes a descent into the underworld or the unknown world, a descent into chaos, an initiation into a new reality of some sort, like a new tribe, or you find a mentor and you start learning about a whole new world, a new perspective that you didn't have before. And finally, the third major stage is the return, where the hero has solved some problem and, as I say, kind of brings back a solution or some wisdom to the community. And I would say it's also this map, this blueprint, this framework is really, in psychological terms, it's the story of how any one of us can go from, sometimes you're sitting on your little pedestal with your normal world, and things seem like they're going well. Something may pull you kind of off that pedestal and rock your world, like this COVID crisis has for us, in the last 6 months, for example. But it can be many things. But something pulls the rug out from under your feet, and like I say, it may feel like you're descending into some sort of chaos in your life. And so a lot of times we end up feeling like a victim, right, of the world, the world at large, the forces around us. And so this pattern, this framework, is really also a tool to show any one of us, how to go from from victim to victor over our circumstances. So yeah, generally speaking, this map that you have in front of you, this monomyth pattern that Joseph Campbell was the first to identify. He found it appears in drama, storytelling, myth, religious ritual, and in psychological development. And let's see if there's any other notables here. Oh, thank you so much, my love. Thanks, darling. Coffee time, guys. Yeah, the concept of the hero's journey, which we've been discussing, ad nauseum here in the Foundry and in the Facebook groups and so on. But it really does. It comes from this book initially, first introduced in 1940. Well, he wrote it, I believe, in 1948. But he describes the basic pattern as follows. A hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. So that's in Campbell's words. And there have been many other scholars and psychologists and who have kind of reviewed the same pattern, but it traces back to Joseph Campbell. Another big one was Eric Neumann, who was a psychologist and philosopher and a student of Carl Jung, actually. So he really did a lot of the work kind of applying it to psychology. And then later, I keep forgetting the name. It's like, Christopher Vogler. Yeah, was another notable author who wrote The Writer's Journey. So he really takes this blueprint and applies it directly to writing. If you're trying to write a book, a novel, or script. With that, yeah, I think actually one other quick note. There was one other scholar around that time. I think it was in a book called The Hero's Journey. Joseph Campbell on his life and work. A gentleman named Phil Cousineau. He wrote in a later introduction, he wrote that the monomyth is in effect a metamyth, like in other words, like the ultimate myth, that kind of supersedes all myths or contains the other myths within it. Metamyth, like a meta hero. But the monomyth is in effect a metamyth, a philosophical reading of the unity of mankind's spiritual history, the story behind the story. So I thought that was an interesting perspective too. But I will just speak on real quickly the major 17 stages. But first off, why don't we go ahead and let's if you guys want to turn to the beginning of your book, I figure I will start with the preface. The truths contained, and let me know, by the way, because I think you guys have a different edition, so it may have some changes, but at least in my edition, yeah, the preface before we get into even page 1. The truth contained in religious doctrines are, after all, so distorted and systematically disguised, writes Sigmund Freud, so yeah, psychologist Freud, that the mass of humanity cannot recognize them as truth. The case is similar to what happens when we tell a child that newborn babies are brought by the stork. Here, too, we are telling the truth in symbolic clothing, for we know what the large bird signifies. But the child does not know it. He hears only the distorted part of what we say, and feels that he has been deceived. And we know how often his distrust of the grown-ups and his refractoriness actually take their start from this impression. We have become convinced that it is better to avoid such symbolic disguisings of the truth in what we tell children, and not to withhold from them a knowledge of the true state of affairs commensurate with their intellectual level. That's from a quote from Sigmund Freud in his book, The Future of an Illusion. That's how Campbell starts out his preface here. And then Campbell comes in. It is the purpose of the present book to uncover some of the truths disguised for us under the figures of religion and mythology by bringing together a multitude of not too difficult examples and letting the ancient meaning become apparent of itself. The old teachers knew what they were saying. Once we have learned to read again their symbolic language, it requires no more than the talent of an anthologist to let their teaching be heard. But first we must learn the grammar of the symbols. And as a key to this mystery, I know of no better modern tool than psychoanalysis. Without regarding this as the last word on the subject, one can nevertheless permit it to serve as an approach. The second step will be then to bring together a host of myths and folk tales from every corner of the world and to let the symbols speak for themselves. The parallels will be immediately apparent, and these will develop a vast and amazingly constant statement of the basic truths by which man has lived throughout the millenniums of his residence on the planet. Any thoughts before I finish that off from you guys? So he kind of, he touches on how, it's a reflection of our psychology, and his life's work was really highlighting the many similarities across cultures and throughout time. Okay, so to wrap it up here, perhaps it will be objected that in bringing out the correspondences, I have overlooked the differences between the various Oriental and Occidental, modern, ancient, and primitive traditions. The same objection might be brought, however, against any textbook or chart of anatomy where the physiological variations of race are disregarded in the interest of a basic general understanding of the human physique. There are, of course, differences between the numerous mythologies and religions of mankind, but this is a book about the similarities. And once these are understood, the differences will be found to be much less great than is popularly and politically supposed. My hope is that a comparative elucidation may contribute to the perhaps not quite desperate cause of those forces that are working in the present world for unification, not in the name of some ecclesiastical or political empire, but in the sense of human mutual understanding. As we are told in the Vedas, truth is one. The sages speak of it by many names. So I think this is why I originally fell in love with Campbell, because rather than pointing at the many differences between groups of people, he really spent his life working to draw attention to the similarities. And and I think it's just fascinating how there is this common thread, this general archetype, this kind of underlying blueprint beneath all the different stories and traditions we have. And then, for help in the long task of bringing my materials into readable form, I wish to thank Mr. Henry Morton Robinson, et cetera, Mrs. Peter Geiger, et cetera. People who a few thanks, and to his wife, who has worked with me from first to last, listening, reading, and revising. JC, Joseph Campbell, New York City, June 10th, 1948. So, this is, what is that, going on 70 years old, something like that, right? But yeah, as I was saying in the beginning, it's pretty fascinating to me how this text really seeped its way into all kinds of different areas of study, from scholarship, of course, but even into Hollywood, how we write our stories today. It informed, I remember watching an interview with George Lucas, who used to, when I was a kid, he was one of my big heroes because I just love Star Wars. And I think this book was one of a few that he read that really inspired, that whole, the Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker epic tale. It really is. and I've heard him comment actually that Star Wars is actually more of a space epic, that it's not science fiction like many others. But anyhow, a lot of that drew from Campbell and his research. So yeah, what do you guys think? Any opening thoughts here on the preface?
And what you mentioned earlier about how it goes over the similarities rather than the differences. It's always a nice viewpoint on things.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, yeah, of course we all have our differences, our uniqueness, but I think especially the more advanced our civilization becomes, it's like, that's really important, to remember what actually ties us together. Like, we don't all have to be working on the same thing. We don't have to, be one hive mind or anything, but we do need to strive towards a lot more unity than we've got today in the world, right? Rather than this extreme polarization and division. So again, I think that's why this is going to be a really, really important story to tell. It's an important book to revisit, particularly at this point in time. So, okay, let me switch back over to this bad boy and just real quick. Anyone who watches along with these, I hope that over the coming months, it's probably going to take us a couple months to get through everything. But yeah, we'll get together when we can and read through a page a day, maybe something like that, and just share this. First of all, in the book, he really does the prologue. He delves into the monomyth, kind of the psychological significance of it and how it relates to, the collective mythology and to our individual dreams. I think I'd said to you guys on one of our mastermind calls recently, how I think it was actually Carl Jung who said, like, mythology is the collective dream, of a group of people, a tribe or a society, and our dreams, like, in our sleeping state, are kind of it's a personalized manifestation of that group mythology that's more relevant to us. But there's a very interesting, fascinating connection, and so yeah, he does. Campbell here in the prologue sections, he kind of touches on both of those areas, like showing how these archetypes and these patterns actually appear in our dreams, and as well as in our stories, as cultures. And then more. So that's the first 40 pages that we'll be starting with, and then part one officially he gets into the adventure of the hero. So the stages. The departure, the initiation, the return, and breaks it down into, like I said, 17 different stages in Campbell's case. So real quick here, while I got this map on the screen, yeah, the 17 stages, they can be shuffled up a bit, and sometimes in a little bit different order. But yeah, there's these 3 acts, kind of like a play. And so those are the departure, the initiation, sometimes called, or I guess sometimes split up into descent and initiation. But thirdly is the return. And I got something here, I think also from Wikipedia. I'll read real quick. In the departure part of the narrative, the hero or protagonist lives in the ordinary world and receives a call to go on an adventure. The hero is reluctant to follow the call, but is helped by a mentor figure. The initiation section begins with the hero then traversing the threshold to the unknown or quote-unquote special world, where he faces tasks or trials either alone or with the assistance of helpers. The hero eventually reaches the innermost cave or the central crisis of his adventure, where he must undergo the ordeal where he overcomes the main obstacle or enemy, undergoing apotheosis and gaining his reward, usually like a treasure or an elixir, magical elixir. So you can think of like the Holy Grail, the quest for the Holy Grail. That's the magical elixir. Um, and I just, well, I'll save it for a second. But yeah, the hero must then return to the ordinary world with his reward. He may be pursued by the guardians of the special world, or he may be reluctant to return for some reason. And he may be rescued or forced to return by intervention from the outside. In the return section, the hero again traverses the threshold between the worlds, coming back from this unknown or unconscious realm back to what at the beginning was his kind of regular existence. And yeah, returning with the treasure or elixir he gained, which he may now use for the benefit of his fellow man. The hero himself is transformed by the adventure and gains wisdom or spiritual power over both worlds. And so, on here you can see kind of many of these stages as we go around the loop. Just go through the major 17. So it begins with the ordinary world, as Campbell terms it, and then the proper separation phase begins with the call to adventure. So even we use this and apply this same framework oftentimes in business, like in our marketing. You can create a customer's journey, right? So the call to adventure is kind of like a call to action, a CTA, but yeah, either there's an inner voice that speaks to the hero, the protagonist at the beginning of the story, kind of calling them to do or achieve something, or sometimes there's a refusal of the call. Like they're hesitant to go out there and do whatever really would fulfill their purpose, and so often there's kind of a rude awakening. Something drags them, into an adventure of some sort or a misadventure. Third stage would be supernatural aid. So that's either kind of meeting with the mentor, finding some kind of teacher, someone who's been on this journey before, like with the Matrix metaphor we've been talking about a bit here and there. It's like that would be Morpheus, right? For Neo, Morpheus is the mentor. He's been there, he's been to that other world, and he knows what it looks like, and he's got allies there, and so he's the mentor who leads Neo to understand what in the world is going on in this other world. And yeah, it's at this time, there's some kind of often withdrawal from the family or the community, and preparation to go on some adventure. The fourth stage is crossing the threshold to the special world, and there's often, they call it like threshold guardians of some sort, or there may be some minor conflict or something as the hero, depending what kind of story we're telling, right? But as the hero passes into this new world, that can be quite the transformative experience in itself. But the journey has only just begun. Fifth stage is what Campbell calls the belly of the whale. And I guess one thing that comes to mind actually is Star Wars, because maybe like in the very first, the original, A New Hope or whatever, the first Star Wars from 1977, I think, right? They go out on a journey. They don the armor of the enemy, and they kind of what do you call it? Not sabotage, but they go on to the Death Star where they shouldn't be.
You activate the tractor beam.
Yeah.
They got pulled into the Death Star, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So and this is a whole new world.
I've seen that
maybe
movie
on a micro scale. Yeah. But the one thing that so they're in this enemy base, right? Like this giant space station, planet destroying Death Star, and I think the belly of the whale moment in that movie is when the princess, shoots open a grate or whatever. They dive down into the trash compactor, remember? And the walls are literally starting to close in around them. So that one always sticks out as a good belly of the whale moment, in cinema, in my mind. So that's kind of the fifth typical stage. And then like that, this is when the proper initiation into like a new way of being. Like that's when like Han and Luke and Leia, like they're all really becoming fighters, like warriors in a sense. So that's the initiation begins. And yeah, initiation phase, I guess the first major step is often the road of trials. There's a bunch of trials and tribulations. I mean, like challenges, right, to be overcome on their quest. There's many tests. Maybe they meet some new allies, and they certainly usually face enemies. Multiple kinds, whether physical or psychological. Stage 7 would be often in, especially traditional stories, it's what Campbell calls the meeting with the goddess. And I guess another thought that comes here would be like the Lord of the Rings stories where Frodo, right? Either of you guys very familiar with Lord of the Rings? He help me out, Rico, or either one of you guys. Yeah, he meets with, I think she was an elf.
Oh, the elf
princess, or
no? She was like a spirit. She was like the guardian. She was like what's her name? Evelyn? Evelyn? I don't think she was an elf, though. I think she was like a spirit.
But there's that meeting with.
Because remember, he tries to get her the ring, right? He says, and she I passed the test. Yeah, she wouldn't take it. I can't remember her name right off. I'm pretty sure because I've read that book quite a bit.
But you know what I'm talking about, yeah. She kind of has her own little.
Yeah, she was like an elemental of sort.
So, but yeah, I think that is a good manifestation, I guess, of that concept of kind of a meeting with, like you say, like a supernatural spirit, or it may be a human in a lot of stories, but someone who brings often, very, very often, it's like the feminine perspective. If it's a male hero, maybe I think it is vice versa often. Like if it's a heroine, a female, character that we're following, but often it's a female, or a kind of like they bring some supernatural force, some wisdom. I think in that story, if I remember correctly, I forget what it is, but she gives them like certain weapons and resources for their journey, right?
It's Galadriel.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
I just Googled it here, so.
That's the one.
She wears one of the 3 elf rings. Galadriel recognized the no-win situation of the elves. If the rings of powers goes to Sauron, then the world of the elves which have been created can be controlled and destroyed by him. If the power of the ring is destroyed, then the power of good of her own ring will be gone too. And she and her world will be diminished. So.
Yeah, and it's, like she has her own little mini hero's journey too, like with the temptation of the ring, right? And yeah, she says she passed the test, so it's interesting. A lot of these stories, they can be so kind of multi-layered, and but so anyhow, moving on. Again, in Campbell's framework, he also breaks down an 8th stage, which is woman as the temptress, and I suppose that would be. I think sometimes there is some overlap with that like goddess character, but something that comes to mind for me is like the Odyssey. I think it was the Odyssey, right, where they're on their ship and they encounter the sirens, these singing, beautiful, almost like mermaids, I think, is kind of the idea. But Odysseus, like he what does he do? If I can recall, like I think he has all his guys stick cotton in their ears while they keep rowing, so that they don't become overwhelmed with the temptation of the siren call. But he has them tie him to the mast of the ship, and so he can listen because he wants to hear the beautiful song. So I mean, yeah, the siren call is kind of a personification of that woman is the temptress theme. And then the 9th stage is atonement with the Father. Sometimes this means like a death and rebirth, maybe a descent into the underworld. That's also where, as the description I was reading before, like the approach to the innermost cave. So it can be kind of also, it could be a literal cave, where the hero, actually, to go back to the Star Wars series, right? The Empire Strikes Back. Where does Luke go? And we think at least that he's encountering Darth Vader for the first time. He's in a cave. Do you remember when he does his training with Master Yoda? He goes down into a cave.
Yeah, he says he goes. There's, from what I remember, he's doing his training, and he says, "I feel cold," right? And then Yoda says that place is strong with the dark side. So then he goes to put his weapons on, and what Yoda says, "You won't need them." Puts them on anyway, and he goes in there, and then he sees Darth Vader. So he's the first one to pull his saber. Then Darth Vader, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hits him in the face. The mask falls off, and it's his face.
Right.
So he's fighting himself. Like it shows your demons, or the dark side of yourself. I guess that's what, to me, that's what it was saying. You're fighting yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so yeah, it kind of, it is like we're saying, like a literal cave. He descends into this little underworld and has to face his fears. But in a way, it's also it's depicting like it's an inner experience, really, right? It's a psychological challenge that he's meeting there. And I think you could argue he may actually have failed that test, right? Because he kind of lashes out in anger or whatnot.
He was the first one to strike. I think that's from what I remember. I haven't seen it for a while, but I think, he was, like Yoda says, you don't need your weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes them, and he's the first one to draw blood, I guess, if that's what you want to call it.
Yeah, it kind of shows, I think, he's not truly as ready as he thinks. Yeah. But at the same time, like it gives him an important lesson, right? A psychological understanding, maybe. Yeah, seeing his own face under the mask, like you say. So, after atonement with the Father, the 10th step on Campbell's roadmap here is apotheosis, which maybe let me see if I can actually look up a definition for that word, because it's a big word. It's it's kind of like atonement with the Father and apotheosis have some similarity. Okay, so I guess there's some Japanese game with that name, but it's more of like on a spiritual level, like divinization, like becoming like deified, becoming at one with the transcendent is what I would say. So yeah, apotheosis, Greek, to deify, also called divinization and deification, making divine. It's the glorification of a subject to divine level, and most commonly the treatment of a human like a god. So, in some stories, yeah, I mean, like you could apply it to the story of Jesus or the story of the Buddha, and that's kind of that transformation, the resurrection, the ascension of Gautama Buddha into the heavens, or um, yeah, atonement with God or with the transcendent, what all Father, that principle, whatever it is, depending on the tradition. But so this often comes along with the ordeal, or the sometimes I would call that bottom stage, kind of the abyss, like the darkest, most challenging part of the hero's journey. Again, so let's say like Jesus, right? Him being crucified has to be the most bloody, you know, the most violent and kind of despairing. I mean, he does despair actually in that story. He does for a moment. He says, Father, why have you forsaken me? But at the same, so it's kind of this strange duality of like the ultimate ordeal, the most painful, like the moment of his death, but at the same time opening up the possibility for a resurrection. So that's kind of like that one. We'll get there with time, guys, if you stay tuned to this series, and it's really fascinating. But that's a very the most the most nuanced and complex probably stage, right? So we've kind of hit the bottom, the 12 o'clock on our 6 o'clock, I guess, on the clock, but the bottom stage, and so now there's been some kind of reanimation, or a new energy, a new identity is often born for the hero. And so stage 11 is called the ultimate boon. That's where the hero unlocks like his superpowers in one way or another, his gifts. There's some reward, some answer, some resource, something that they get after going through the ordeal. And now we kind of start to cycle around into that final act of the play, the return. So stage 12 is the refusal of the return, which, that's not always an element, but often the hero wants to stay in Neverland, if you will, like they've adapted to this new reality, this new tribe, this new world in some sense. And, maybe they don't have any desire to go back home. And actually, like, I think I've felt that, right? Like in travel, I would say, I went on maybe one of my first big hero's journeys, like by deciding to go to the far side of the world and, go to places where I didn't know the language. And at first that was terrifying, but once I became accustomed to it, I was like, you know what? I never want to go back. So there's that refusal of the return sometimes. Next up, the 13th step would be the magic flight, or the road back. And so, especially if there's kind of a hesitance or a refusal to go back to share what he's learned or what he's gathered, back with the people that he kind of began with. And then sometimes the magic flight, like he'll either be chased off by demons, or shuttled off by like a magic carpet, perhaps, if you're Aladdin. And I guess that rolls into, next up would be the rescue from without. So again, like sometimes, there are supernatural forces or just allies around the hero, kind of help get them back, through, there's kind of a return road of trials. Number 15 would be the crossing of the return threshold. And again, that will take many different forms, but it's kind of the just officially, making that return from this foreign land, this unknown world, or the unconscious, and coming back sometimes through some form of resurrection, sometimes through just simply going back home, like back to the Shire, I guess, in Frodo's case, or you know. And but the weird thing is it's different when they get back. You know, it's not it's not the same place you left at the beginning of a story. And finally, well, yeah, stage 16 is the hero becomes the master of these two worlds. You know, so they started out at home, they went into the unknown, and they mastered that to a sense. And then they return, and that's kind of its own process. Yeah, maybe to readapt back to home, to the normal world, but a fully developed hero, like kind of it becomes a master of two worlds. It's like they, in whatever form, but they're the person who is the bridge almost between these two, maybe two opposites, but they walk the line between, you know, two communities, two different perspectives, two continents, you know, two of something, two worlds, right? And they bring back the elixir or some secret understanding or some tool to their community in that original where they hail from, you know, their tribe, their community, their family. They bring something back that helps like the whole community thrive. And so that's the final stage, freedom to live. It's like, finally, yeah, we've returned. Like things are different, and that takes some adaptation to get used to again. But the hero finds a way to really to share what they learned about themselves underneath it all, but like what they learned on their journey, you know, in a way that kind of helps revivify the community, if that makes sense, and keep the community going. And so, and I believe, yeah, in a psychological sense, this all sounds very dramatic, you know, and it is in our stories. But on some level, like this is the journey we go through as individuals as well. You know, if as long as you're willing to, well, you're either willing to go on your adventure, or like we say, like something will probably drag you down into the chaos, you know, and you'll need to fight your way out. And so we've been saying on our calls lately, I do feel like for many of us, myself included, like maybe it was the refusal to go on the journey that we should have gone on that's kind of dragging us into a crisis, you know. But the crisis itself presents opportunities. It's going to be painful and very difficult, and the world around us is going to change, and yeah, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty, you know, about this new world, this new normal. But hopefully we can learn to face those challenges bravely and find allies on our path, and you know, basically overcome ourselves underneath it all, overcome our own failures and shortcomings, and work from within, you know, from the inside out, and find the gold inside of ourselves, find the lessons that this perhaps difficult time will teach us, and share that, you know, share it with the community to keep revivifying our stories, our cultural mythology. So that's my spiel. Any thoughts from you guys? What do you think?
You think Corona, what's going on right now, is the world's hero's journey? See, maybe that's me. I'm kind of looking at it a little bit after reading some of this. I actually read a little bit today. You know, like we're in the dark. You know, it's like how do I say it? So I'm not good with words. When this all started, like that's the initiation, that's the journey, or the start. You know, now we're kind of in the pit, and maybe like the third part, we can come out as better humans and a better world after this.
Well, yeah, I think, let me get that back up real quick. yeah, I think this
unification, right? The separation, the ordeal, which we're doing, the descent. Maybe we're still in. Maybe we're still in the second threshold.
Yeah. I think learning this map, this roadmap, if you will, it's whatever you're going through, whether you're trying to build a business like all of us are on our mastermind group, or whether you're going through kind of like a spiritual awakening or anything in between, if you're whatever your journey is, if it's in your mind space, if it's in your health, if it's in your career, or if it's in relationships, any of those 4 pillars.
Like a blueprint.
I do believe, it's a blueprint for growth, right?
Yeah.
For learning, for transformation, and so I think
every show, has the basic, the 3 parts here. The journey, the descent, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. What else? Like pretty much any superhero type, the anti-hero even applies to this. Yeah, like I said, I kind of was reading a little bit today. It's pretty interesting. A little bit over my head, but but it's I think it's going to be fun doing this, guys.
Yeah. Well, so and that's why I wanted to share this with you guys, the process of reading through this. Like I say, I first dove into this about, I should figure out exactly, I guess 16, 17 years ago. And Campbell, I guess, especially by today's standards, he can come across sounding very, very academic. I mean, there's stuff in here that, I'll need to look up the words or the names from old tales, old stories occasionally. But I think together it'll be fun just to read a bit at a time, and then we can kind of reflect on any parallels we see in our own lives or in the world. And riff on, like we've been doing, just the movies and the stories we grew up with, where we see these patterns. But as we were saying a moment ago, I think the more you familiarize yourself with kind of the general blueprint, it actually will help you identify where you are on your personal hero's journey, like in your growth, your personal transformation process, whatever that is for you, whatever you're working. Because I think a lot of times, you find yourself somewhere and you feel almost hopeless. But if you can identify, here I am, so it means, I might be approaching, my ordeal, I might be in the depths of the abyss, feeling that way inside, right? But you can start to identify, these are the resources and the allies that maybe I should look out for, and maybe I'm on the precipice of my comeback, my own psychological resurrection, if you will. I think it helps to really identify, where you are on your path, which is why I see a lot of value in this. But what were you going to say, Eric?
I was going to say, one of the things you mentioned about having to look up certain things. When I was reading through some of the book earlier, I was like, I'm going to have to be doing lots of Googling on this.
Yeah.
try to kind of get the backstory of everything and everything that it's talking about. Trying to understand fully how it's picturing everybody or everything that it's mentioning in there. Because as far as mythology, I'm not too familiar with. It's something that I've always been interested in, but it's not something that I've kind of really, looked into. And as far as what you're going through, the hero's journey, I think you had a teaching several months ago in the Foundry that went over this whole thing, correct?
Yeah, I did kind of on the whiteboard a little mini workshop.
Yeah.
So if you guys haven't, I'm pretty sure Rico would have seen that right by now. but yeah, feel free to review. I'll try to link that up inside our group. And yeah, if you haven't watched that one yet, Eric, definitely give it a once over. I think it's fairly short, like half hour, 40 minutes, and a high level view of the cycle of the hero's journey. And like I said with you guys, I want to, however quickly or slowly we get through it, but with your help, I would love to, just read through. I want to read and share, for the people, I hope we'll have some people tuning in eventually for our live broadcast. Like this one, it's just unlisted, but in the future, I'd love to go live and invite the bigger audience around our community to tune in and start to just create a series, where people can just listen in and hear about Campbell's thoughts, but also with a more modern perspective, from the three of us, like our reflections on it. And eventually we'll be kind of distilling this or translating it into a more. I have a little more simplified kind of 12 steps. That sounds funny, but it is like a 12-part blueprint of my own, where I simplify from the 17. I was thinking to maybe actually start with the prologue, but do you guys? I mean, we've been going about an hour, and that's been a great intro. Yeah, is there any questions, or what do you guys feel? Do you want to keep pressing forward a little bit, maybe read the first 2-3 pages, or should we just leave it at that?
I'm good.
Yeah, you want to press forward?
Sure.
Well, that'll be good.
Okay, well, so then let's turn to the prologue, the Monomyth. And I don't know about you guys. So do you guys both have the same edition, the hardback or something?
I believe so. Yeah, it looks like it. Hardback and
So
separate.
Let me know, because the page numbers might not line up. But at least for me, it starts with page 3, like the actual written content. Number 1, chapter 1, Myth and Dream.
Yeah, that's our page 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So 2 pages off, but close enough.
Yeah, it has the preface. It's not numbered, and then we have I got page 1.
Okay. Well, so yeah, like I say, this book is probably 20 years old, actually. So we may have like a different whatever, the page numbering will probably not line up. But anyhow, Myth and Dream, right? So yeah, I'll read through. I'll read like a paragraph at a time, if that sounds good, and then maybe I'll pause, and if you guys want to jump in with something, feel free. So Myth and Dream. Whether we listen with aloof amusement to the dreamlike mumbo jumbo of some red-eyed witch doctor of the Congo, or read with cultivated rapture thin translations from the sonnets of the mystic Lao Tse, now and again crack the hard nutshell of an argument of Thomas Aquinas, or catch suddenly the shining meaning of a bizarre Eskimo fairy tale, it will be always the one shape-shifting yet marvelously constant story that we find, together with a challengingly persistent suggestion of more remaining to be experienced than will ever be known or told. Throughout the inhabited world, in all times and under every circumstance, the myths of man have flourished, and they have been the living inspiration of whatever else may have appeared out of the activities of the human body and mind. It would not be too much to say that myth is the secret opening through which the inexhaustible energies of the cosmos pour into human cultural manifestation. Religions, philosophies, arts, and social forms of primitive and historic man, prime discoveries in science and technology, the very dreams that blister sleep boil up from the basic magic ring of myth. So again, kind of that idea that even our dreams, you know, I mean, our subconscious is plugged into like what Jung called the collective unconscious, you know, and that's where those myths, those patterns and archetypes, those heroes, that's where they live, you know. So like, I mean, in a psychological sense, at least, they are real because they have an influence on us, you know. And any story that's been whatever valued and preserved and passed down, especially if it's come for thousands of years, it's like, you know, that means something, that has psychological significance, right? And it informs most all other areas of culture. The wonder is that the characteristic efficacy to touch and inspire deep creative centers dwells in the smallest nursery fairy tale. And I think of something like Pinocchio or Peter Pan, you know, like there's such deep lessons in those too. As the flavor of the ocean is contained in a droplet, or the whole mystery of life within the egg of a flea. For the symbols of mythology are not manufactured. They cannot be ordered, invented, or permanently suppressed. They are spontaneous productions of the psyche, and each bears within it, undamaged, the germ power of its source. What do you think about that? Our symbols are not manufactured, but they're spontaneous productions of the psyche.
Well, look at the cave art and everything else. You look, you know, from history. You know, Cody, you traveled in Asia, and you know, I've traveled in Indonesia quite a bit. You know, especially Borneo and places like that. You know, Bali especially, they're really into the gods. They call it the island of the gods. You know, everywhere you go, it's offering 25 or 40 times a day. So it's everywhere. So it's part of the human psyche. Even or their psyche, I should say, it's their belief, you know, and it's very strong belief.
I mean, yeah, like
they all have guardians, you know, like they all have guardians. They all have. It's kind of like the hero's journey again, right? Like I'm not an expert on Balinese religion, but I know quite a bit of it. Is, you know, from what I've been reading here a little bit, it's like on the little bit of the hero's journey, the guardians, you know, the underworld, black and white, everything's neutral, you know, yin and yang, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly. I mean, I believe. Yeah. Most of that. You know, it's obviously their own flavor. So speaking of Bali, you know, like their own cultural flair, if you will. But yeah, you know, predominantly Hindu belief system out there, right? And yeah, Campbell does get a lot into like the Vedas, the Upanishads, you know, the ancient Hindu scriptures in here as well. So yeah, we'll be learning a lot more about that. Just sorry to side tangent, but yeah, how I know, Rico, you've been reading through this for a while, right?
Well, I started last year. I kind of, like I said, it's a little bit not over my head. It's just I'm not, you know,
it's a lot to digest.
Yeah, you know, it feels like I'm in college a little bit again.
Yeah.
No, but I started reading it, and then the last couple of days I've been going over it. You know, it's really interesting actually. He's quite the man actually. If you actually what he's come up with here.
Yeah. Yeah, so. I agree. But what about you, Eric? I think did you just recently get your copy? Have you dove in very much yet?
Yeah, you know, I've had it probably for, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks or however long it's been. Not too long, and I've only read through, I guess you'd say, maybe the prologue, and I found myself wanting to go back over and reread certain things because I feel like I'm not quite grasping everything that it's talking about. So it's just kind of, I think from my knowledge of everything, it is a little over my head. but it is something that I want to be able to grasp more.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, as we go, you know, if you guys have questions or something, yeah, you want to read back over something doesn't quite fit in, you know, the puzzle piece doesn't quite fit in for you, then yeah, feel free to speak up and let me know, and we can review, and I'll at least do my best to give my thoughts. So,
Okay.
but yeah, let's press on here for a little bit more. So, what is the secret of the timeless vision? From what profundity of the mind does it derive? Why is mythology everywhere the same beneath its varieties of costume? And what does it teach? Today, many sciences are contributing to the analysis of the riddle. Archaeologists are probing the ruins of Iraq, Honan, Crete, and Yucatan. Ethnologists are questioning the ostiacs, I don't know how to say that, but the ostiacs of the River Ob, the boobies of Fernando Po. Yeah, these are things I should look up, but maybe in a second. A generation of Orientalists, and I guess that's people, probably Asian studies is what we would call that now, right? But just forgive the guy. This was 1948, okay? Anyone watching? A generation of Orientalists has recently thrown open to us the sacred writings of the East, as well as the pre-Hebrew sources of our own Holy Writ. And meanwhile, another host of scholars, pressing researches begun last century in the field of folk psychology, has been seeking to establish the psychological basis of language, myth, religion, art development, and moral codes. I actually just, yeah, if you guys have any thoughts, feel free to chime in, but I kind of do, since we're here, might as well look up some stuff along the way, right? Ostiacs of the River Ob. I have no idea what that is. Ostiacs. A tribe who inhabit the basin of the Ob River in western Siberia. Okay, interesting. So I guess that's like Russia, right, today? Belonging to the Finno-Ugric group and related to the Voguls.
Wouldn't that be like the Mongolian?
Yeah, I think somewhere, at least nearby that region, yeah. Hold on, let me see if I can share again. There. So that's from Wikipedia, at least, yeah. And indigenous peoples in Siberia. So you're probably, yeah, I think you're right. Illustration from 1793. So anyhow, I guess yeah, in that paragraph, he's referring to like archaeology and different digs, different studies happening in different parts of the world, Iraq, Greece, Mexico. So yeah, this probably is in modern day Russia, right? And then the boobies. I'm afraid to look this up. Maybe I boobies of this funny Fernando Po. Never heard of that. A species, of course, yeah, booby like a bird, but Fernando Po. I'm afraid to click on some of these. Which one should I click, you guys? Huh. Interesting. Okay, so here's like a really old New York Times article from 1903 about natives. Oh, come on. Interesting. But I thought a species of bird. Huh. Anyways, I guess point being, yeah, people, when I was in university, yeah, I did. I never, went on any archaeological digs officially. Although one of my professors that I was closest with, he would go to Iraq or Iran like almost every summer, for some archaeological dig, which was really fascinating. I mean, the I guess that is kind of the seat of Western civilization. Like all three major religions kind of trace back to that region, right? And it's unfortunate these days, like that like ISIS has been destroying a lot of cultural and religious heritage sites throughout that region. But anyhow, I think Campbell, yeah, he's just pointing to like how, yeah, we're still, we don't know our own history in many ways, right? Like we have some ancient scrolls that have been preserved and passed down, and yeah, we do have, each major religion has some stories they preserve, but we're still trying to piece together the past as best we can too. And one of the most interesting things in my experience in college was like, I wrote my thesis basically on the historiography of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were like a new find in the 1950s that had the oldest, at least at that time, the oldest remnant copies of some of the books from the Jewish and Christian scriptures, and a couple in there that had been thought to be apocryphal, like they were not really included in the modern day Bible, but they predated, like a lot of other stories and scrolls, really scriptures that we had. So anyhow, it's interesting how like we try to look back to the past and piece it together as best we can, and understand in their context, what they were trying to say with those stories, or what those symbols and patterns meant. So to get back to Campbell, aside from the archaeological stuff and the looking for the roots of our how folk psychology and how that has kind of manifested in our language, myth, religion, art, and moral codes, right? Okay, so back to Campbell. Most remarkable of all, however, are the revelations that have emerged from the mental clinic. The bold and truly epic-making writings of the psychoanalysts are indispensable to the student of mythology. For whatever may be thought of the detailed and sometimes contradictory interpretations of specific cases and problems, Freud, Jung, and their followers have demonstrated irrefutably that the logic, the heroes, and the deeds of myth survive into modern times. In the absence of an effective general mythology, each of us has his private, unrecognized, rudimentary, yet secretly potent pantheon of dream. The latest incarnation of Oedipus, the continued romance of Beauty and the Beast, stand this afternoon on the corner of 42nd Street and 5th Avenue, waiting for the traffic light to change. I like that. So he's saying, like, yeah, even though we're still trying to piece together, those ancient scrolls and really understand, especially from their time and place, which is so radically different from where we are today. A lot of those, the underlying stories, they do still survive in our dreams, in our psychology, and in our stories, in Disney movies like Beauty and the Beast, even. What do you guys think? I really like that, in the absence of an effective general mythology. And I think this is the point we've kind of been touching on recently in our private calls. If the culture isn't providing like a well-developed mythology or story. We do kind of, we each have our own that we carry inside of us that's maybe part of like the unconscious group mythology. But like he says, yeah, private, unrecognized, often at least, rudimentary, not complex, yet secretly potent pantheon of dreams. So it's like I say, all those archetypes, those gods and demons, like they live in our heads in some sense.
I think he's correct. To me, when I read that again, it's like we're still identifying with these folk tales and the gods and everything while we're waiting, now in modern, 1948, right? People are still, like in modern times, are still looking to that for guidance and wisdom. That's what I think that's there. That makes sense.
Well, and like he says it's standing on the corner of 42nd and 5th Avenue. It's like, even in the middle of New York, I whether somewhat embodied in a person, or I almost think he's kind of, he's talking about like our movies too, like our pop culture does reflect these things, right? So all the stories we've been sharing recently, obviously like Star Wars and The Matrix and Black Panther, it does survive in our films and our modern pop culture storytelling to some degree. I think it was doing fairly well up until, I don't know, I won't put my finger on it, but up until recently, it still exists, but it's starting to. I have noticed a change.
I saw your comment on this new Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
They made Luke Skywalker look like a old fool.
Yeah. Kind of an old coward. Yeah.
It's kind of weird. I remember going to the movie and watching that, and I didn't really. That was kind of weird. That was awkward.
Yeah.
The way he was acting, I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, speaking. I guess that was that the Last Jedi? Is that what that one was?
Yeah. Well, so
spoiler alert, guys! If you haven't seen The Last Jedi, I'm gonna spoil it for you. But in the first one, they killed off Han Solo, right? Like his son kills him, which is pretty tragic. And to be honest, I finally saw the third of the Disney trilogy. I actually finally saw it this last week, and I'm still mulling over it. And so I'm not 100% concrete yet on my stance on it. Although I would have to say I had very low expectations after that second one, the Last Jedi, and so I was almost protesting, I didn't care to see the third one in the theaters, and I avoided it for a long time. But anyhow, so it did surpass my very low expectations. It was better than I thought it was going to be. But I think.
On the first one is where I lost interest. I saw everything that went on. It just kind of didn't seem to pan out the way the rest of the Star Wars did.
I saw was with the first one, it looked to me like they're basically just trying to repackage exactly the same first original trilogy, but with new characters, and it was messy. It was not done well, and I didn't think there was much character development for any of these new characters that Disney introduced. Still, even after 3 movies, there's very little character development. The second one, but because they killed off Han Solo, I guess in a certain sense, there is. I think what it is there is an interesting story arc. I would say, especially for Kylo Ren, is that it? Han and Leia's son. That's the most interesting storyline, if you ask me, in the Disney trilogy. I just think Rey, who is I assume is supposed to be the main character, she has no. It's not because I'm sexist, guys, but she has no character. She's just a flimsy character, It's not. I think in the third one it got a little bit better, but it was so she can just do anything. She never had to learn or go through very much struggle, and she's a better Jedi than Luke or the Sith Lord. She can fly the Millennium Falcon better than Han Solo. Like the first time she ever sees it, it's like it's ridiculous. But anyways, so overall, I guess my point is, I think especially in Hollywood or in movie making, in cinema these days, there's some directors and writers and stuff out there that certainly do still follow this pattern, and they recognize the value of these archetypes and this hero cycle. And there are other ways to tell a story, but it's just been reflected in all of our cultures, all of our stories for such a long time that the hero who does go on this kind of adventure resonates so deeply with our soul, with our, even though we might not even comprehend the profundity, like how profound it is or why, but it really resonates often, right? Like those first Star Wars movies, I still love them, even though they're a little campy if you go back now, but I will always love the first three movies. And there's many more, but anyhow, I think it's you can still find them in our modern day pop culture storytelling, but I see a lot of people just want to be what's the word, like
They want the visual effects. Like it seems like the stories fall by the wayside to me.
Well, there's that. Certainly there's that too. I mean, and that's, I've seen that even with George Lucas at the helm, like with his prequel trilogy, he just like went way over the top with just constant visual stimuli, right? And the underlying story, I don't think was as good or profound, but yeah, like
I can't remember. I used to go to the show quite a bit, and I can't remember the last time I've actually enjoyed a show that I think it's been forever since I've gone, just because of what's going on. I can't even remember. Like it's the movie industry now is, I don't know. It's I don't know if it's politically correct now or what. They're trying to push, like, I'm not that type of person either, Cody. But it's like they're trying to push a narrative that,
right, an agenda. It is.
And I don't know.
Yeah, we used to go to watch those films because we could all use an escape from the political stuff that's going on around us, and yeah, like that's the thing. Like this blueprint is the one thing I believe we all have in common. Like I said prior, like no matter what end of the spectrum you're on, ideologically or politically, like I do think that this is like an inner. I guess it exposes, I think, our inner guidance system. A lot of people are asleep to it, but it's something that is built into us, into our psychology at least, or you could say our soul. And so that, that's why those kind of stories will appeal to people across the board. But these days, it's like so many.
It's a really good movie is First Blood with Sylvester Stallone. I just watched that again. That was amazing. Like I remember that was the first. I was just in Hope actually where they filmed all that. I think you liked the picture. We actually kind of went around to the shooting locations, but a lot of them are closed because of Corona, right? So it kind of we went to go where he's hanging off the cliff. That was closed.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that you actually watch that movie again. It's pretty good. When you're a kid, you see the whatever, but he doesn't actually kill anybody. First, except the guy, he threw the rock at the helicopter and the guy fell, right? But But you actually watched that movie again. It was pretty really good. It's a really good show.
Cool.
Well, I've kind of seen that I would recommend.
Just a couple final thoughts before we dig back into the content here. But I think I do see a lot of when it comes to Hollywood, like they're trying to inject a political message, which they'll take a side tangent for an hour. Like I think it was that second Star Wars, to make some point about, I don't really even know, animal abuse or something. But it doesn't fit in with the story. It's like, okay, that's great, but it's out of place, when you try to inject that into a hero story, and yeah, so I think between the political agenda of certain filmmakers and I do hear a lot of people these days talking about, like, they want to subvert expectations. It's like, well, okay, that's great, but just tell a really good story of a inner transformation. Sometimes we don't want our expectations subverted.
Yeah, it seems like they don't want to make anybody upset. Like they don't want to. I don't know.
Playing it too safe, yeah.
Yeah, another good show was 1917. I don't know if you've seen that, Cody. That's pretty good.
I think, yeah. That one was
excellent.
Yeah.
And they got a lot of heat over that for two male lead characters. It's like, okay, that's World War One. Like it wasn't. You know what I'm trying to say? Like
yeah.
And it's weird.
Well, yeah, sometimes I think, we're gonna see them going back and rewriting history, like with movies.
Yeah.
World War One, the front was all led by female fighters or something.
Of course there was men. Like that's the only ones that fought. Like it's not a sexist thing. That was what happened. That's reality.
Mm-hmm.
Dunkirk, I remember reading, that movie too. Like a lot of people were mad because there wasn't any female parts in it. It's, I don't know.
Yeah, it is what it is.
It is what it is. I really am not that type of person, but it's like you can't rewrite history to make. Not everybody's going to be happy, I guess.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they get their feelings hurt. And it's just craziness. But
let's see if I can get through one more page before we wrap up today. So yeah, he's bringing it into the modern day, and as we're touching on here, obviously it does apply still in many of our pop culture stories. But he's going to delve now into like some of this dream work that I've been mentioning recently. So I think he's going to quote here from Clement Wood in a book called Dreams, Their Meaning and Practical Application. I dreamed, wrote an American youth to the author of a syndicated newspaper feature, that I was re-shingling our roof. Suddenly I heard my father's voice on the ground below, calling to me. I turned suddenly to hear him better, and as I did so, the hammer slipped out of my hands and slid down the sloping roof and disappeared over the edge. I heard a heavy thud, as of a body falling. Ugh. Terribly frightened, I climbed down the ladder to the ground. There was my father lying dead on the ground, with blood all over his head. I was broken-hearted and began calling my mother in the midst of my sobs. She came out of the house and put her arms around me. Never mind, son, it was all an accident, she said. I know you will take care of me, even if he is gone. As she was kissing me, I woke up. I am the eldest child in our family and am 23 years old. I have been separated from my wife for a year. Somehow we could not get along together. I love both my parents dearly and have never had any trouble with my father, except that he insisted that I go back and live with my wife, and I couldn't be happy with her. And I never will. That's a grim dream, huh? Do you guys, we touched on dreams on a recent call. Do you guys have much of an active dream life, would you say?
At one point, I did, back when I was getting more sleep. But
I was just going to say, I think we both work shift work. I do, but I don't. Like I've actually been to a sleep clinic. I don't get REM sleep. The doctor has never seen it before. I was all hooked up and everything, and because I thought I had sleep apnea, but he's like, you don't get any REM sleep.
I have sleep apnea, actually, yeah. So I have yeah, somewhat the same, probably. You know, it's rare that, I mean, I think I do have them somewhat regularly, but yeah, it's like I rarely wake up with any memory of it, you know, and I don't get the deepest sleep either. But it's funny because I notice, I think I go through cycles, because there's periods when I will have just the most vivid, crazy dreams. Like I've had dreams of like, I don't know, alien invasion or the apocalypse or something, you know, like intense, like really, like stuff that sticks with me to this day. Like I one of these days I feel like I should, I don't know, get into painting or something. Like I gotta find some way to just visualize it, to capture it. But then yeah, I'll go for really long stretches where it's almost nothing. At least nothing that comes back from the unconscious with me by the time I wake up.
Well, it seems like whenever I was having, I guess, dreams in general was probably before shift work. Like Rico said, it was might be the shift work that's causing all the issues there. But I know before I started, though, it seems like I would go through cycles as well. Like it would be like day after day after day for maybe a week or so. That it'd be like a pause for like a month or two, then it start back up again. But lately, it's just nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, like at least in my experience, I could be off base, but I feel like I'm starting to notice a pattern where, like he's like Campbell's going to get into here. You know, it's like, yeah, when I'm going through like maybe transformative periods of my life, maybe I'll put it that way. You know, like hard changes, or really struggling with a big fear, or just a problem that I'm trying to solve. Like that, I think tends to be when I have like the most vivid dreams. And so it is interesting to think like, yeah, maybe it's that the unconscious or the psyche is like trying to work out the problem while I'm sleeping, you know, or maybe it's trying to send me some coded message, you know, through symbols. I haven't done much dream work myself, you know, like trying to really analyze my dreams, but I'm learning more about that, which is interesting. But yeah, like when life is going pretty well, it's almost like this is gonna sound really weird, but I guess I feel like I almost like live my daydreams like in my waking life. Like, you know what I mean? Like the more you get your life together, like you can have like the dream of what you want to achieve, what you want to have, and like yeah, when I'm making that a reality, my dreams kind of go away, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's like in the times of turmoil, like when I'm not living my dream, like that's when my sleep, my dream life gets really active. So it's interesting. But so that was a quote from, you know, some young man who 23-year-old who had written into the paper about his dreams. You know, and yeah, he's working on the roof and accidentally drops a hammer on his father, which is pretty grim. But so Campbell says, the unsuccessful husband here reveals with a really wonderful innocence that instead of bringing his spiritual energies forward to the love and problems of his marriage, he has been resting in the secret recesses of his imagination with the now ridiculously anachronistic, dramatic situation of his first and only emotional involvement, that of the tragicomic triangle of the nursery. So I guess tragedy and comedy, triangle of the nursery, like, yeah, son against the father for the love of the mother. So this is getting a little Freudian, I suppose. But so just my personal thought, it is interesting because I think he kind of, yeah, it's like rather than bringing his energy forward to work on his marriage, right, with his wife that he was unhappy with, he's resting in the secret recesses of his imagination. And you know, maybe that's why, yeah, it's like I feel like when I'm applying my mental and spiritual energies to actually getting it done, you know, in real life, and it's going well, like I say, like my dreams kind of, they're rare, they're few and far between, and they're not like profound. But maybe like when I'm wrestling with stuff and I don't know what to do and I feel stressed out, like that's when it's like it goes into that energy is like working overtime in my dreams and in my head, in the imagination.
And in these dreams that they're talking about, I know here, and I know I'm gonna guess another one or two dreams coming up in the next few pages that talks about basically, you know, loving like your mother and everything like that. And I guess like everything that I've read and understand from, I guess when we're growing up, childhood and everything like that. Things that I had seen is it's our, I guess, our love for our mother as well. Like we're like in love, not just like love because she's the mother, but if that makes sense. I know there was another story coming up talking about I guess the mother and everything like that in fantasies and stuff, and I know from what I had, I guess, been taught in school and everything like that, it's actually something that happens to us when we're little. We actually are like, I guess, infatuated with them for a long time until we get away from them.
Yeah, I mean, Freud, right? Sigmund Freud and Freudian, that school of psychology really does focus a lot on that, like mother. What is it called? Well, I guess the Oedipal mother, I think. But yeah, kind of like you're saying, yeah, from an I'll just put it in context of my personal experience, right? Because I've got a 6.5-year-old son going on 7, and yeah, it is like I tend to subscribe more to the Jungian side of psychology, which is a little bit different. And a lot of people follow Freud. I wouldn't say it's it is mainstream psychology, but a lot of people also critique Freud that like he almost had an obsession with that dynamic. A lot of people like accuse him of actually having like an infatuation with his mother into his advanced years. So but I do think there's something like I don't like to like over what's the word to focus on that particular dynamic to a huge extent, but there is something to it. And I think it's like when a baby's born, like the baby has no concept of self. Like they have very few developed psychological concepts at all. But like they are essentially, literally part of the mother. They're attached. They get their food from the mother. Like my wife is pregnant right now. So baby Sophia is growing inside of her, essentially part of her body. Like it's a unique individual, but they are literally connected, and they share the same immune system until the time comes. And that's actually a hero's journey of its own, if you really think of it in those terms, because there's a separation, but still, for a significant period of time, the baby literally needs to breastfeed. It needs like the touch, the tactile. It needs to be close to mother for a long period of time. Needs that nurturing. And so I think at least the first year, like from the child development stuff I've read, an infant really kind of sees itself and the mother as one at the beginning, and it goes through a phase. He or she, not it, but a child goes through those first couple years of development. It is a slow and somewhat painful separation, and it's been interesting, because I see that in my son at times. I mean, he's getting to the point now. I think by 6 or 7, that's when like they really develop their own unique. They be like their own personality starts to come out. But for the first several years, it's like they're so integrated, they're almost one, and I think that has something to do with it. Probably for both sexes, but especially, I mean, for us men, for boys, like your mother is she is the archetypal woman, right? That gets like programmed into your psychology from birth. Like that is what it informs your ideas of what a woman should be, what a mother should be, what a wife should be. And yeah, it's interesting, right? Interesting how all those ideas develop. But yeah, I think typically speaking, right, one's mother is like the archetype for that idea of woman. Same with your father. He's the archetype for what a man is. And actually, I think he's going to get into that here in a second. But I lost my spot. So, okay. So, yeah, it's talking about this tragicomic triangle of the nursery, as Campbell calls it. The son against the father for the love of the mother. And, yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah, well, you got your boy there. But yeah, in those first several years, it is, at least in my experience, yeah, there is some degree of like competition. I'm curious to see what it's like with a little girl, because I do think it'll probably have some differences. But yeah, sometimes there can be a little bit of just challenge, like between the two males, because yeah, like we both want mama's attention. We both need to relate to her. So anyhow, apparently the most permanent of the dispositions of the human psyche are those that derive from the fact that of all animals we remain the longest at the mother breast. Human beings are born too soon. They're unfinished, unready as yet to meet the world, which is true. Like, yeah, a lot of animals come out like ready, like they're walking on all fours already, within a couple minutes, whereas human infants, like, you're still developing for 25 years really especially before your brain fully develops. Consequently, their whole defense system from a universe of dangers is the mother, under whose protection the intrauterine period is prolonged. So let's see. There's a little footnote: the origin and function of culture. I was curious if there's an intrauterine. I guess that means like, yeah, the transition from the mother's uterus, something like that. But the I guess that's the infancy period is prolonged. Hence, the dependent child and its mother constitute, for months after the catastrophe of birth, a dual unit. Like birth. I have to, when I've thought about this, like, yeah, I think the baby's inside there, happy as can be, like living in this little water world, funny enough, right? Like you're a water creature inside your mom, and you're protected in the womb. Actually, by the way, matrix, I believe, is like a Greek derived word that actually relates to the womb. And so mater, mother, and matrix, and the womb, like there's a lot of overlap there. Like the mother, that's why we have like the Mother Earth, or the mother goddess archetype, because we kind of live maybe in the cosmos, like in the womb of a transcendent archetype, at least. But anyhow, okay, so getting back down to brass tacks here. So yeah, the dependent child and its mother constitute for months after the catastrophe of birth a dual unit, two but one, united, not only physically but also psychologically. Any prolonged absence of the parent causes tension in the infant and consequent impulses of aggression, which I've certainly seen that. Yeah, like mama leaves the room and the baby will start to make a real fuss. The moment they come back, they hush down. Also, when the mother is obliged to hamper the child, aggressive responses are aroused. Thus, the first object of the child's hostility is identical with the first object of its love and its first ideal, which thereafter is retained as the unconscious basis of all images of bliss, truth, beauty, and perfection. So that's a parenthetical. But yeah, its first ideal is that of the dual unity of the Madonna and Bambino. So, that's like Mother Mary would be Madonna, right? And Bambino meaning the child. And, that's why we have those images, right? What's it called? The one where Mary's got like the adult Jesus in her arms, after he's been crucified, or every religion has this great mother and the almost divine infant. But yeah, it's such a deep archetype because it's where we come from. Every one of us comes from a mother, and most of us have a pretty close relationship with our mother, at least in our youth. And so that does establish that archetype, right, for bliss, truth, beauty, perfection, but also the first hostility arises because we don't get everything we want. We don't get every one of our desires immediately addressed, right? Because parents aren't perfect. But so yeah, this next paragraph is really interesting from my perspective as a father. The unfortunate father is the first radical intrusion of another order of reality into the beatitude of this earthly restatement of the excellence of the situation within the womb. So yeah, mother and child have this kind of beautiful thing going on, this unity, this nurturing, loving relationship. I mean, with its faults, but yeah, they are almost as one. And then father comes in essentially as an outsider. And this was really when I first read this and processed this, yeah, it was very eye-opening, particularly for me now, dealing with young kids. Because I have to admit, early on, especially with my family, I often felt like, mama's the little protector trying to always keep baby happy and, almost bending over backwards to as much as she can to give him everything he desires. And father, me, I come in and I'm often the one who lays down the law. I'm more disciplinarian, or just more concerned about defending in the bigger picture from the outside world. But I think that poses a threat to the initial child mother relationship. I come in there with my ideas kind of from the outside, and you do sometimes. I don't know about you, Eric or anyone else who watches, but I've certainly felt a feeling where it's the idea of the big bad wolf almost is projected upon me. It's I feel like the bad guy, in certain situations. So the father therefore is experienced primarily as an enemy. It's oh wow, that's enlightening. It kind of makes sense. To him is transferred the charge of aggression that was originally attached to the bad or absent mother, while the desire attaching to the good or present, nourishing and protecting mother, she herself normally retains. This fateful infantile distribution of death, or thanatos, destrudo, and love, or eros, libido, impulses. This infantile distribution of death and love impulses builds the foundation of the now celebrated Oedipus complex. So yeah, he's kind of building out what that Oedipus complex looks like, which Sigmund Freud pointed out some 50 years ago as the great cause of our adult failure to behave like rational beings. As Dr. Freud has stated, King Oedipus, who slew his father Laius and married his mother Jocasta, merely shows us the fulfillment of our own childhood wishes. But more fortunate than he, we have meanwhile succeeded insofar as we have not become psychoneurotics in detaching our sexual impulses from our mothers and in forgetting our jealousy of our fathers. This is from Freud's The Interpretation of Dreams. Or, as he writes again, every pathological disorder of sexual life is rightly to be regarded as an inhibition in development. An inhibition in development. For many a man hath seen himself in dreams, his mother's mate, but he who gives no heed to such like matters bears the easier fate. That's from Sophocles. Oedipus Tyrannus. Oedipus Rex. The play. What do you think? This is getting pretty deep already, huh? I love how he just immediately dives in the deep end of the Oedipus complex. But it's an interesting dynamic, right? And it kind of, yeah, for me at least, yeah, when I first started to study this, it's like, okay, yeah, it kind of, I guess it shines a light on why the father, it's like, looking back on my own childhood, right? Yeah, I was a mama's boy when I was young, and I had a lot of issues with my dad growing up. Like, I think it was just always like that. I mean, my dad was great, like, not to talk bad about my father at all, but I had a really, I guess, just a very difficult relationship with my father until I got to probably about like 18 or so, and I kind of made amends with that. So it's interesting to look back. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe those patterns are kind of almost established by simply the biology, like, in the circumstances of your birth, and yeah, it's mama nurturing you, and it's dad coming in being like in my case, like, I'm the one trying to turn my boy into a man, so it comes across kind of hard sometimes, it's not loving and doting, it's not comfortable, but it's tough love. Like, I didn't appreciate my father's tough love until I was older and more mature, and I realized that's what it was, So let's press on a little bit more. The sorry plight of the wife of the lover whose sentiments instead of maturing remain locked in the romance of the nursery may be judged. So yeah, I guess, talking about maybe that guy who wrote in with the dream, rather than coping with like his mature circumstance he's in with a wife, with a new female who's now stepped into that role, rather than like the motherly archetype. But he's maybe still stuck in the immature, the childhood patterns that he hasn't quite worked out. The sorry plight of the wife of the lover who's locked in the romance of the nursery may be judged from the apparent nonsense of another modern dream. And here we begin to feel indeed that we are entering the realm of ancient myth, but with a curious turn. Sorry. I dreamed, wrote a troubled woman, that a big white horse kept following me wherever I went. I was afraid of him and pushed him away. I looked back to see if he was still following me, and he appeared to have become a man. I told him to go inside a barber shop and shave off his mane, which he did. When he came out, he looked just like a man, except that he had horse's hooves and face, and followed me wherever I went. He came closer to me, and I woke up. I am a married woman of 35 with 2 children. I have been married for 14 years now, and I'm sure my husband is faithful to me. So Campbell says, the unconscious sends all sorts of vapors, odd beings, terrors, and deluding images up into the mind, whether in dream, in broad daylight, or insanity. For the human kingdom, beneath the floor of the comparatively neat little dwelling that we call our consciousness, goes down into unsuspected Aladdin caves. Yeah, like what we think of as our psychology is like, that's the conscious stuff mostly, and we kind of try to keep it neat and organized, but the reality, our unconscious and the collective unconscious it goes deep into, I think Carl Jung said, it descends down into the depths of hell, which is scary. But again, like, that's why our fears, that's where they come from, the darkest most horrible things, it's part of us too. It's in us. There, not only jewels, but also dangerous jinn abide, like genies, right? The inconvenient or resisted psychological powers that we have not thought or dared to integrate into our lives. Again, yeah, like all that deep, dark, scariest, the things that during day-to-day life we want to keep at arm's length. Like let's not go there, you know. The things we have not thought or dared to integrate into our lives. And they may remain unsuspected, or on the other hand, some chance word, the smell of a landscape, the taste of a cup of tea, or the glance of an eye may touch a magic spring, and then dangerous messengers begin to appear in the brain. These are dangerous because they threaten the fabric of the security into which we have built ourselves and our family. But they are fiendishly fascinating too, for they carry keys that open up the whole realm of the desired and feared adventure of the discovery of the self. Destruction of the world that we have built and in which we live, and of ourselves within it. But then a wonderful reconstruction of the bolder, cleaner, more spacious, and fully human life. That is the lure, the promise, and terror of these disturbing night visitants from the mythological realm that we carry within. I think that's a good place to pause. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? It's like, you know, kind of in terms of dreams and the unconscious. He's talking about how even the things we have in our stories, like, yeah, they leap up out of those depths within us somewhere, and you know, they occupy our minds too, and it's terrifying, but maybe they hold some secret key, right?
So whenever I was reading over this, it kind of made me think of at least towards the ending, the hero's journey talked about. It says a fully human life, you know, cleaner, bolder, more spacious, and to me that makes me believe it's kind of returning back to getting back from the depths and everything like that, and what you were going through earlier, just kind of a hero's journey right there. But I'm not 100% sure on that though.
Well, yeah, I do think, you know, he's kind of setting up the expectation for us as we dive into this book, I guess, of like, yeah, like these creepy characters come out of our subconscious or unconscious, you know, and I mean, even just delving into mythology itself, it can be very daunting or intimidating. But you know, there can be a terror, like, yeah, people are scared off by thinking about their dreams or thinking about the unconscious, thinking about even mythology, right? However, there's something kind of attractive about it too. And I guess it's kind of like what we were talking about, like with delving into what's the word? Why am I having a brain fart? Conspiracy. Sorry. You know, like even those stories, like, yeah, they can be terrifying, but there's something alluring to it also. But you know, like, don't go delving into conspiracy, but let's delve into our own stories and whatever archetypes and characters we have running around inside of us. You know, it's a scary prospect, but I think, yeah, here he's saying it's like it has the promise, like, if you will embark on this daunting journey, it has the promise to give you such a, like, you can either ignore it and avoid it and pretend like that unconscious and all those terrors are not a part of you, but you're going to be incomplete, you know, in that case, versus if you accept the call to adventure, essentially, you know, and if you're willing to approach those things head on and go on this journey, like deep into yourself, really, is what we're talking about. It's going to be kind of scary, it's going to be hard, but yeah, it gives you the keys to to rebuild yourself. That's where you talk about shadow integration in psychology. It's like really delving into the darkest parts of yourself, your insufficiencies, the mistakes you may have made in the past, I mean, we all have, like, yeah, I call it a dark warrior, like a shadow side of us that is kind of telling us to do the wrong thing, and occasionally we indulge that, but you can either deny it and pretend like that's not true and just pretend like you're goody two shoes, which is in almost every case you're lying to yourself, right? Or you can tell the truth, accept that, you do have a dark side. We all screw things up and we do the wrong thing occasionally because we're human. But if you delve into it and explore it and I guess show some compassion to even that worst side of yourself, you can start to heal yourself and become more whole. Yeah, and it gives you a certain superpower, I would say, if you embark on that process. It's it's a lifelong process. But yeah, the destruction of the world that we have built and in which we live, and of ourselves within it. It's you're gonna, by going on this process of what Carl Jung would call it, individuation, and integrating this unconscious and bringing those things into the light, and learning the lessons and accepting your own humanity, really, but your brokenness, your insufficiency. You go through this process of unraveling, I guess. I went through that a couple of years ago, and it can feel like, the whole world is unraveling, but then you get to rebuild yourself with a stronger foundation, a much deeper understanding, a wisdom that you didn't have, in the more immature stages of life. And you get to own it. Own yourself, own your mistakes. And as Campbell says, then a wonderful reconstruction of the bolder, cleaner, more spacious, and fully human life. And it's funny because I don't think I hadn't revisited this book in some time when I first came up with it. But one of my kind of 3 driving principles for years, which I put it on my Twitter, I think, is live fully, seek truth. Okay, Rico. Well, we're going to wrap up here in just a second anyways. But yeah, thanks for being with us, brother. Any parting words, buddy?
No, it's interesting. It's getting the wheels turning a little bit. Yeah, I'm gonna read a little bit tonight when I get home. Sorry, I gotta do a couple of things. So before I gotta work tomorrow morning. So
yeah, buddy, no problem.
I gotta go. So wish I could stick around.
Okay, man.
Take care, guys. I'll see you guys on. Yep, Saturday. Sounds good.
All right, take care.
All right, man. Thanks for being here. Yeah, we're wrapping up here, but what was I saying? Now I lost my train of thought. Anyhow, any other final thoughts from you, Eric, before we call it a night?
No, you're hitting pretty good points whenever you were talking earlier. So yeah, let's keep going.
Well, yeah. So that's what I was saying. Some of my guiding principles personally for years now have been, seek truth, chase greatness, and live fully. And it is interesting to see him say that. Yeah, the reconstruction of ourselves, of a bolder, cleaner, more spacious, and fully human life. It's human life entails accepting, the dark and the light, the good and the bad things about ourselves and others around us.
Yeah, and that I remember seeing that quite a bit. That with the thrilling heroics stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Acceptance of ourselves, all the parts of ourselves. It's we're gonna build strong foundations and set ourselves up for a path of continual growth, right? Continual Like basically try to be better every day, better than you were the day before, yeah, like that should be that's how I think we should orient ourselves in life and be striving towards what like Jordan Peterson calls a guiding star, like a vision for the best version of ourselves, the greatest thing we could become. So yeah, and ever striving towards that, but also the understanding and the acknowledgement, like you're never gonna completely embody the hero, you're never gonna be the perfect man. Like none of us are ever gonna be Jesus,
Yeah,
like
always a work in
he's like the
progress.
archetype of the perfect man who never committed a sin, but like I gotta admit, like I'll never be that perfect, I can strive for that greatness, but yeah, but also, yeah, we gotta, like, rather, because a lot of people live in denial and they're like, they almost, it's too painful to accept responsibility for their dark side, their mistakes, their shortcomings. And so you tend to you blame other people, or you almost project that's what's weird about shadow work. And I don't want to go too deep just yet, but yeah, people do, they project their own evil, I guess, in a sense, their own insufficiency or their own mistakes. We find a way psychologically to project it out into the world or onto other people, when the reality is, it's like we were saying on one of our journaling training videos recently. I think I said, I did begin to recognize, like, I'm feeding the beast. Like, it's actually like the things I don't like the negative stories going, the news, the conspiracy. It's like eventually you have to recognize, like, I'm partly responsible for that too. Like, my behavior is feeding that. And so maybe what I actually need to do is draw my energy away from it in whatever way I can and channel it into more productive things, like even like politically speaking, whatever side you're on. Like, yeah, if all you do is spend your free time, watching or reading the news and getting upset and frustrated about people you disagree with, and then share that and spread that message and just like curse people and, point your finger and call, say how horrible other people are. I mean, are you really making the world a better place by doing that? No, Are you really? You're not even investing your time and energy in creating solutions, but what you're doing unconsciously, but what you are doing is you're feeding the fear, the frustration, the division, So that's, I mean, and we all do it. But yeah, like,
it's never your fault, right? It's everybody else.
Yeah. So anyhow, guys, yeah, like, for those of you who tune in, thanks for joining us. Eric, thank you so much, man, for joining me, getting the book. And yeah, we're gonna host a book club from now on, and this should be available first off within the Foundry Accelerator for members of our community, but we will be sharing these just on YouTube. I hope, yeah, we'll meet again in the next few days, and we'll hopefully over the coming weeks start to establish a bit of a routine, maybe. But yeah, that's like the first half a chapter we got through. So we'll pick up where we left off next time, and it's gonna be one hell of a journey. Yeah, it is a foreboding, path to walk down, but like Campbell says there, it's like it has the promise of, if you go through this process, you can come out on the other side. Through experience, guys, I would tell you, like, I feel whole, actually, at this point, because I've consciously gone through this process now. Like, I went through it unconsciously many times, and then I really did the work to understand what this cycle is, that reflects both in our stories, our mythology, but it also applies in our life, in our psychology. And yeah, like, through my life experience, like, now I feel like I have to steal another term from Jordan Peterson, I guess, like I burnt off the dead wood, a lot of it, you know, and it was long and difficult and painful, but managed to kind of piece myself together again in a much, much more robust and resilient way. And now it's like, okay, now I'm really building myself, my life, my business, my family in a way that I couldn't before because I had no idea what I was doing in the beginning. So yeah, thanks for coming along with me, Eric. It's always a pleasure. And thank you guys for watching, and I hope you'll join us again next time. We'll dive further into, what was that first chapter? Myth and Dream.
Awesome, and I'm looking forward to it.